Okay.
So now we go on our phone
No,
and go to that.
of course I put my phone away.
Anybody sitting here or?
Sit wherever you want.
All right.
I'll introduce you.
I'll send a place for Rizal too.
Because I sent that link out to everyone.
Yeah.
How's things in La Palma?
Oh, it's good. It's good. One of the council member, her sister died. So that's, I know. Her dad just died like a month, 2 months before, right?
It says live, but
Look at that. Very nice.
And we're recording it.
Oh, what, you're recording? I'm going to save a space for her next.
oh, there you go.
Okay, good.
She can sit here.
You got my email.
I said awesome.
You guys,
Yes.
And I'm gonna say
Yeah.
we.
introduce your son, he's conducting it.
Yeah.
All right.
And then I wanted to,
I sent
Perfect.
the link. So
Awesome.
you know, usually I do seminars at the board of.
No, I don't worry about it. This is lesson learned.
So I sent the link to my people. Because I usually do seminars like this anyways, you know.
Like I said, 6:30 is when we'll start.
Yeah.
Just so we. Hi, Sanjay. How are
Nice to
you?
meet you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Councilwoman from La
Palma.
Palma.
Laval, thank you so much.
Also,
And I have a doll who is the candidate for Congress. She's Indian.
Oh, awesome.
Coming too. She'll
Yeah, I
be
convinced
here
my
at-
sisters to stay here for that reason.
She'll be, oh really?
Oh.
She'll be here at 6:30.
So,
Fundraising for her.
perfect, perfect.
Here's her flyer. She'll be
I'm
here.
gonna go outside and
All right.
make sure that they get to the.
She'll see my card.
So hope, yeah, please.
Thank you.
All right. All right. We're actually live right now. Yeah.
Are you
So I'm gonna
live?
turn this off.
Quiet.
Yeah, we're streaming, just testing.
We're streaming live, so,
Oh.
but
Yeah.
it'll just be myself, I'll explain at the beginning.
Okay.
I'm recording this for my other clients,
Oh, okay.
so. So, no, we're not, this part's not being recorded,
Okay.
so some parts being streamed, but the recording is gonna be when I start talking, so,
And this part will be cut out.
yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
nothing to worry about,
Turn your mic off.
I just turned it
Oh,
on.
okay. I'm like,
They're all.
No, it's also.
Streaming thing, I like. I
So
like this.
this is
thing.
our
Whatever
first-
you have done, I'm
This is
loving it.
the last time when I did the seminar, everyone's like, we do streaming, you know, and so Scott generously volunteered to be a guinea pig, and so this is our first time trying all this.
Everything is A+.
So apparently he said,
Very nice.
starting the next one, we should be able to do it on Facebook Live as well and Zoom.
I usually go Facebook Live. You know what? Where's Indian food?
I'm streaming everywhere.
Oh.
We're in-
My sister said, she's like, why don't you order from your
I
restaurant?
know, like, the Indian restaurant is my favorite.
But Brooklyn's
Direct through the race.
He's doing it.
Oh, where did it
He's
go?
an Artesia business owner.
Oh, yes. I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
And
Thanks.
you
I was
not,
hoping for
you not
Indian
figure
food
out.
from an Indian restaurant, right?
Let her know there's also
Thank you.
parking in the back.
Oh,
It's my pleasure,
This is
really.
amazing.
oh, yeah. Oh, she'll figure
It's
it
all
out.
fun, it's all.
She's Indian, she's smart. She's been
It's
here
hobby
many
for you.
times. Let her figure out.
I've run several businesses to the ground, this one's on its way. so
I got dates, how about that?
Good one, congratulations.
That's a huge compliment.
Councilwoman here is going to take care of more
You
business
know,
for
they
you.
said dates are good for you.
They are.
Yeah, they're good. So, everything,
That's why
I
I
just
like
worked out, so.
Oh, you did, good for you.
Pilates. So-
my grandma said.
I
Yeah,
didn't
you
see you
can-
with that cookie.
Spit it out.
Huh?
I didn't see you with that cookie.
No, I don't do cookies much.
John,
Hi, Sunita. Very nice to meet you.
Sanjay's sister,
Hi.
Laura coming in.
And this is her flyer. She's gonna be here at 6:30.
Oh, very
I'm
nice.
supporting her, AAPI woman.
Yes.
I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, if you're running, I'm supporting you because you're AAPI.
I like that.
Yeah, I don't
I
care
remember
what,
you.
I don't care what your letter is, if I think your value is there, you know, I value business. I'm a Democrat. But I still wanna support AAPI, right? I'm trying to get this higher up. Too short.
You might have to sit on it.
Huh?
Might have to sit on it and.
No, I'm trying to pull it up.
Scott, is there a way to
I
tell?
just switched chairs.
Scott, can we tell how many people are on the YouTube page? I'm sorry, is there a way to tell how many people are on the YouTube?
I still couldn't hear
Get
it.
here?
Can you tell?
I'll just do it.
Tell by
I was expecting it.
You guys got pizza because of Frank,
Says
huh?
something there.
Frank.
I don't have it.
Actually, I would prefer the Indian food.
I
too.
know. I'm like,
So I'm on
my
strike.
favorite restaurant's downstairs.
I think
You
that
can
is
go
after
after
this time.
No, my wife, I didn't know if we were gonna have it.
Yeah.
You guys start at 6:30.
Yeah.
People, okay, yesterday, who went to the Sheraton art gala.
They've started.
It started an hour and a half late.
Oh, wow.
Indian Asian. Indian Asian
The
customer.
franchises are getting, China's credit card.
ISTs.
Asians were always late.
Finance event.
Maybe if I go to the right email account.
Okay. Ooh, much better.
You like being tall, huh?
We'll
I
have you
started
try
my
them
12
out.
feet to
I know, I
ground.
like my stairs
She
to
didn't
be
say
tall
that, I
too.
didn't hear that.
As long as
It's
my
been
feet still
rude.
touch the ground, it rains, so I'm just wearing these. No high heels.
Yeah, same here.
Frank, I'm gonna have you,
Right there.
Frank, I'm gonna have you introduce.
So Council, for La Palma, the mayor transition, how does it happen usually? Is it automatic or?
If they like you enough, they can skip over me.
I thought John was
Dear
there. I
Lord.
can't even-
They can like me enough.
Seriously, over there too?
There's a popularity contest, okay?
All right.
Nepotism.
No, no, it's all right. I'm good with nepotism. I
Are
can
you
come
right?
with you.
Come to my city.
I'm in your city.
Okay.
Act busy.
Let's just say you're support.
I got dates
Look, we
lined
are
up.
very conscious here, all right? We're having a conversation.
Don't worry.
Don't worry.
Don't worry.
Let's finish this one.
Thank you. Hey, look, I'll support you if you wanna run.
Thank you.
We're
I
going to
absolutely.
district. We're going to district.
I just wanna check outside one more time.
It's just 6:30 yet.
I know.
Oh, she's gonna be here in 7
Get to
minutes.
meet everyone.
I don't know, I'm not gonna start.
Oh, yeah?
I wanna get people some time to get here, 'cause I know people are gonna come.
You have the gavel?
Give
Give him the gavel.
The only reason I was gonna wait a little bit, but I think because I have so much to cover, and I don't wanna, like I said, my goal is
On this side,
to
you have bound.
allow for questions and answers.
Sure.
Last time there's a lot of questions,
No, no.
but we have a lot to cover too, so.
You're not bound.
Who lives in La Palma, who wants to run? I'll support you. Or I'll get Alitage to support you here. Artesia.
That's a good thing, I think.
I do want a chamber of commerce in La Palma.
I'm trying. I finally got the,
Trying is not getting it done. It's like, won't take a year.
I
It
know.
should take like 2 weeks for you. You have enough people, tell them, sign the paper.
Did you know
No.
that my colleague and I are trying to,
Who, you?
not me, but my, for me, but the idea. I already ran that,
When is the next council meeting? Maybe I should come and speak.
don't say I sent you, okay?
Huh?
Don't say I sent you.
No, but you will recognize me if I speak. You won't cut me off, right?
Then they have this 5-minute thing. But you'll see it.
7 o'clock, 6 o'clock.
Where am I going to live? In La
I
Palma.
will be presenting myself as a La Palma resident.
Oh, nice. Should run. I can't wait.
Hello, sir.
We did have you probably come here and press the space bar for me.
We have.
One of you is gonna have to press the space bar for me, because we don't have a clicker, unfortunately. Next time we'll learn how to.
Very nice
Once
setup.
bank in this.
Oh, well, thanks to my sisters
Thank you for the
and my
food.
wife and my father-in-law,
And
so
water.
all the families.
It's very nice.
Oh, actually, China, the chair.
How are the numbers?
That's what it was there for.
Thank you for the dates. I love it.
Should we get started? Alright, let's do this.
All right, let's do this.
All right.
Scott, you wanna,
Can I
Shut
go on
the back door?
Facebook Live for you?
sure,
Hold on. Give me a minute.
no problem.
How do you notice?
Hold on, let me,
Frank, you wanna get up and introduce yourself and then, tell us how this kinda came together? It did happen thanks to you and the Artesia Chamber.
What's happened to about all of us? Good afternoon, everyone. Frank
Oh.
Alfredo.
There's a mic for
Give
you.
you a mic so that way it gets out there on the world. There you go.
Okay, Frank Belspirito, Artesia Chamber of Commerce, an independent business person. This came about because the city of Artesia and Sanjay there's a need to get information out there to protect the business community. So we've been pondering on a lot of different subjects that we wanted to do this year, next year, and the year before. But this year we're going to try and cover at least in 3 different quarters, 3 different subjects, one being today's seminar about what you don't know in 2024 with the new business laws. I think the next one's going to be about ADA, and I think the next one's going to be
Family law.
family law.
Right.
Okay, so with that said, let me introduce some of the chamber members that are here today. There's Sam Desai of, name your tax company? Wake Up.
You'll figure it out, remember.
He's a chamber member. He's the secretary of the, he's a, not secretary, treasurer of the chamber.
We are going to
Janet
edit this, so
Conklin
don't
here.
worry. We're going to edit all this, so don't worry about it.
Janet Conklin, she's a councilwoman for La Palma, and then there's myself. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Sanjay. And
Right. Well, I don't need that, so let's you can get that over here.
Thank you.
Good evening. So this is the first in the series. As I mentioned to some of you, this is going to be a lot of firsts. So this is the first seminar for 2024. As Frank mentioned, we're going to have several other seminars over the quarter. My goal is to do one every quarter. The next one's going to be on ADA. The one after that is going to be on family law, and the last one's going to be, ironically, on 2025 laws, because by September we already know what the new laws are going to be. And so one of the reasons I wanted to do these seminars is because essentially, obviously I'm an Artesia business person, want to make sure the business owners know what's going on. And with the new laws coming out, there's a lot of things that people need to be aware of. Now, obviously, a couple of disclaimers. It's not legal advice. There is going to be a question and answer period. Feel free to raise hands. However, let's keep it very general. Again, because of my malpractice insurance, I cannot give legal advice. I can only give you generalities, which is going to be sometimes frustrating, because a lot of times I may just say it depends. So we are also recording. Don't worry, it is being streamed live. If you look at it, no one's going to be featured except for myself, unfortunately, for the camera. And basically, we're going to be editing this out and sending this to anyone that registered for the seminar. It is a big presentation, so I'll admit there are portions I'm not going to go over. I'm going to mention for homework only because there's several big laws that come up. And again, let's go to the agenda, which is the next portion. We're going to cover the main portion, which is going to be the California minimum wages in 2024, the Fast Food Act, as well as some of the higher minimum wages in some of the cities that you need to be aware of, and counties especially. I'm also going to cover California exempt salary guidelines, because there's a lot of laws that a lot of people don't seem to understand when we do salaries, and so we're going to cover that. I'm going to lightly touch on reasonable accommodation and transfers, simply because it is more HR based, and frankly, it's something that we need to have a more in-depth conversation on. Presentation has some key points you need to be aware of. I'm going to then move on to the non-competition agreement laws, which is the new law starting this year. Well, I'm also going to cover the new law, which is the Reproductive Loss Leave Act, and I'll talk about what the rights are under that in the next page. And again, the agenda continues. Again, I'm going to lightly touch on pregnancy disability leave, because it is more of a refresher. There's nothing new that's there, but it's still included in the presentation. I am going to cover the paid sick leave act, because there's been some changes to this new law. There's new hours that you need to be aware of, and this affects every employer. So I'm going to touch on that. I'm going to talk about weed. And I'm going to talk about off-duty weed use, and so how California is seeing that now. So, and it's important as employers how we need to open that up, because there's potential for wrongful termination and retaliation based on this new law. I'm going to lightly touch on workplace violence, and also what you need to do to prevent it. And the reason being is because there's a new law that we need to put into a program that every employer needs to put into place, which is called the Workplace Violence Prevention Act, in July. And if there's time, I'll try to go through some of it. Again, in the presentation is very laid out in detail what you need to do, what needs to happen. I'm going to touch on the high points for that. And I'm finally going to end on a low note, so to speak, which is the Corporate Transparency Act, which a lot of business owners that have LLCs and corporations are worried about. It's relatively straightforward, but it is something, again, anyone that has an LLC or a corporation needs to do. So this applies to everyone. So with that said, let's jump into it. You can keep going. Again, this is all new for us. I did forget to mention a couple of few things. This is for the first time we're streaming live, so there are going to be some hiccups. Case in point, we don't have a clicker, so that's why I made my wife be the clicker. So go ahead and keep pressing. Yes. One more time. So, there's a lot of information on this one slide, simply because there's so many different laws that are in effect. Currently, if you are basically a California employer, you need to be paying $16 an hour to every minimum wage employee that you do have. Starting in April, and I'm sure many of you probably know this, the Fast Food Act is coming into play, which is going to increase for fast food locations $20 an hour. Now, the fast food locations that are impacted are franchisors that have 60 locations nationwide. So this applies to the Starbucks, the McDonald's, those kind of fast food places. It doesn't affect dining restaurants. So case in point, a place like Panera Bread, which technically is fast food, but it's considered exempt. But having said that, if you are a McDonald's employee, you can be earning $20 an hour starting in April. Now, what is interesting, go ahead, John.
60 locations?
60. And that's again in the presentation. So that's a good point. So a lot of people were concerned. So now the dynamic for a lot of business owners in Artesia is a little different because a lot of us are franchisees. And so even though those are technically independent businesses, we're now affected by this because if you happen to own a franchise that's under this law, guess what? Your labor costs are skyrocketed. So that's something you need to keep in mind. Now, if you're in the healthcare industry, starting in June, we're going to be looking at $18 to $23 an hour. This is people that are caregivers in nursing homes. This could be nurses. It's a pretty broad area. I'm going to go through it quickly only because most of us aren't in the industry, I'm going to assume. Keep in mind, overtime. So because it's $16 an hour, the overtime rate is going to be $24 an hour or $32, which is double time. So you have to look at, this is where it gets a little tricky because what happens is that people want to average hours, or they want to look at you're not doing anything productive, so I shouldn't have to pay you for that. Or the fact that there are employers that say you only worked 20 hours average over a couple of months, and I've seen that happen. California law doesn't allow you to do that. Also, it doesn't allow for people to just be paid only 100% commission. You can no longer say, I'm only going to pay you 100% commission, there's no base pay. California frowns upon that because essentially, if a person doesn't sell anything, guess what? They're not making any money. That's what activity-based compensation is based on. So we need to be aware of that. I'm going to go over now the higher local rates, which is the next slide. And actually, I already covered this, so I jumped the gun. Keep going. Next slide. There you go. One more. They freeze?
I actually appreciate the commission part. I did not know that you can't do the 100% commission.
Not anymore.
A lot of us are salespeople.
Right. Well, there are exemptions for certain, I do want to, again, I can't go through all the exemptions. There are exemptions and exceptions to certain industries, but if you're a salesperson generally, a retail salesperson, they can no longer just be 100% commission. There has to be a base pay. Brokers, I believe, are exempt. And again, we can get into that a little bit. There you go. So I pointed out these three main cities because I have a lot of clients that happen to be in the city of Los Angeles, which is called the unincorporated area of LA County. If you happen to have a business in this area, you need to be paying $16.78 per hour for minimum wage. And starting in July 2024 of this year, it's going to go up to $17.24. So a lot of business owners aren't aware that if you are in a different city, And by the way, I didn't, there's actually 15 different cities in California that have different minimum wages. Obviously, the minimum wages are higher in up north. I didn't include them because, again, we're in Southern California. I did include West Hollywood because West Hollywood is actually very unique. I'm currently dealing with this with several of my clients, and I represent actually the employees, and they were being paid $16 an hour. Unfortunately, the business owner didn't know. They thought they were doing the right thing because, like, oh, it's California, I'm paying $16 an hour, not realizing the minimum wage has gone up to $19.08. They also have a unique sick pay, where paid sick leave for every employee. It becomes very important. A lot of the minimum wage laws in cities that have different wages also tend to have different health benefit requirements. So it's very important to know what city you're in. We're in Artesia, so technically we're LA County, so we can follow, luckily, the California recommendations. However, if you're in one of these cities, be aware that the Paid Sick Leave Act is also different for that. We can go, and then the next city, the next county actually is San Diego, and their hourly rate actually is, I think it's listed on, it's $16.85 per hour. You can click on it one more time. One more time, yeah. So $16.85 per hour, and if you're in San Diego. And we can keep going actually. Now, that was just the hourly employees. And so I'm going to briefly now touch on what it means to be exempt. I actually am not going to, generally, if you're an exempt employee in California, there's two things you need to actually achieve. One is called the salary test, which is essentially you need to be paying your employees double the minimum wage, and also the duties test. The reason I'm only bringing up the salary test is because with the salaries going up, with the minimum wage going up so much more now, essentially, if you're going to pay somebody a salary and call them exempt, at a minimum, they need to be making $66,000, $560 a year. If they're making anything less than that, they're technically not considered exempt. And guess what? If they're not exempt under that, you have to pay for now overtime. You have to pay for meal and rest breaks. You have to count their hours. That's where a lot of people get in trouble. They're like thinking, I had an employer, unfortunately, again, no mistake of his, he was in a different city. He didn't realize that he was paying just a little bit under the salary that he should have been paying. Guess what? That employee now is considered non-exempt. And then he had to pay severe penalties because he missed it by a few $1,000s for the year. So also, exempt employees are different in the sense that if they work one day, you have to pay them for the whole week. You cannot just say, oh, you only, this is how it works, right? If you're going to make someone salaried, you can't pick and choose what they cannot do. You can't say, yeah, you only work 4 days, I'm going to only pay you for 4 days. No. If they work even 1 hour or 1 day in a week, they get paid for the whole week. There are some deductions. I'm not going to get into it because it's very, very minutiae, and I don't want to get bogged down on that, but there are very limited deductions you can do. Now, I'm going to mention some of them. Generally, for absences, if they take a full day off and they've used up all their PTO, they don't have any vacation, you can, by dividing up their annual salary by 52 weeks, and then how many hours do they normally work, deduct that full day. Mind you, this has to be a clear written policy. So do not do this and suddenly decide, oh, I'm going to just deduct the 1 day because you said you weren't going to come in. If you do not have that in your handbook and it's not spelled out, guess what? You could be liable. Partial days. No, generally, if an exempt employee takes a partial day, guess what? They still get paid. There are generally no exceptions for that. In fact, also, I don't recommend it. I've had employers call me and say, well, this person always calls out. They always seem to get sick. I always then talk about, and I'm going to briefly touch on this, is if somebody's calling out all the time, half the time, and there's something going on, and you kind of know there's something going on, it's time to sit down and have a conversation. Maybe you can accommodate them. Say, hey, maybe I can make you part-time, and then maybe I make you hourly because you're going to not be able to work as a salaried. So that's the time to have a conversation. But do not start deducting because they're taking half days off. Guess what? You just are going to make yourself liable. We can keep going. Joe. I covered the annual salary. Okay, partial date. Okay, let's talk about sick leave. So you really need to have a legitimate reason. You need to have a legitimate sick leave plan. Time and time again, I have people that get tired and say, well, you know, we have a policy and we have an understanding. Generally, I let my employees, they tell me they're going to call out, but they start picking and choosing if they don't like an employee and say, well, you know, traditionally, I let all my employees take a day off because they call in. But if I tell one employee that I don't really like, I say, no, you need to provide a doctor's note. And that's not a written policy. Guess what? Now you're basically retaliating. And so be aware that you need to have a written sick leave plan. Your handbook needs to be very clear on how someone can take time off. You know, whether you're going to require, if it's more than 1 or 2 days, if you're going to require a doctor's note. And then again, you also follow through that policy, meaning that you ask anyone that takes off, let's say 2 days, you're going to say, I want a doctor's note. Can't just say, I like this person, I'm not going to ask them. So keep that in mind. Again, you can deduct for sick leave. Again, I'm going to mention the paid sick leave act because, like I said, most counties allow you to, employers have to provide some 3 to 5 days in paid sick leave. Again, you can deduct a full day, but again, if somebody only says, I have a headache and I'm going home, and they've worked for 5 hours, you cannot deduct the partial day. You have to treat it as a paid day. I know I'm going through a lot of this very quickly, only because these are the kind of decisions that business owners can get themselves in trouble with. Because, you know, we make these operational decisions, and sometimes I know it's a pain in the butt. You're a business owner, and somebody says, hey, I want to leave, I want to get out of here. And you suspect something otherwise. If you don't have a policy and if you don't have the right documentation, you're going to get yourself in trouble. So keep that in mind. You can prorate if they're a new employee and they've just started out and they're working less hours, or they've already given their notice and you know they're leaving. Let's assume they've given their notice and they're only going to work 3 days in that week. If it's very clear, you can then at that point deduct their salary. Those are the 2 exceptions for the salary exemption. Again, be consistent. Also, don't remember that somebody goes on FMLA leave, or do you have a question, or do you want to? Or California Family Rights Act leave, then that does not change the exempt status. Somebody goes on pregnancy disability leave, somebody is taking care of a family member, somebody is pregnant, or taking care of their partner. Those are not leaves that affect their status, so keep that in mind. We can keep going. So I promise you, this is a lawyer in me. This is the only law, this is the only case I'm going to mention. It's important, and I'll go through it very briefly, only because it's really important because it talks about premium pay. Generally, what happens is if if an employee does not take their meal break, skips a meal break, or they take their meal break late, they're entitled to a 1 hour, what is called a premium pay, a penalty. Essentially, you're supposed to pay them, let's assume I'm a $16 an hour employee and I miss or I take my lunch late, which is after the 5th hour, I'm entitled to a $16 penalty. The question ends up being is, do you need to disclose that onto the wages? Because it's a cascading idea. If you don't list that penalty, that I pay the penalty, guess what? Now you have a non-compliant, what is called a wage statement. You have a non-compliant wage statement, there's a penalty for that. So you paid them late, you owe them a penalty. You didn't put it on their paycheck, you owe them a penalty. You forgot to pay them, or you wrote it down, but didn't write, you owe them for waiting time penalties. Well, the Supreme Court basically made it clear that these kind of payments need to be listed on the wage statements. Because before it was kind of not clear, because is it a penalty? If it's a penalty, why do I have to put it on the paycheck? Because paychecks is only for the hours that I worked. And so the California Supreme Court finally made clear that if you are going to pay the penalty, you need to make sure it goes on the paycheck. And if it doesn't, it's going to be considered a wage violation. So that's the only case. I'm going to leave for you to read the rest of the case. I'll skip through it. Oh, go ahead, Frank.
I'm confused, and that's okay, right? it's a penalty, so the employer's paying the employee
Yes,
the amount of the money, so it's an employer, it's a penalty against the employer, and it's a plus for the employee.
yes.
Okay, so there's a plus.
Well,
and a
I
minus.
think what the Supreme, thanks for bringing that up, actually. So, look, a lot of times what was happening in this case was they were not letting it was a security guard. They essentially were working on the clock. There was no way for them to take a lunch break. They were not scheduling anyone to give them a break. They just said, we're going to pay the penalty. So I think the Supreme Court didn't like the fact that these people are willfully violating the law that, look, people are entitled to a lunch break. You can't schedule them in a way they can't take a lunch at all. That's fine, it's a mistake, it's an oversight or happens, but you had a policy of not letting these people take their rest or meal breaks. I think the Supreme Court had a big problem with that. So yeah, that's the problem.
Okay.
Does it have to be exactly after 4 hours?
5 hours. Before the fifth hour, they have to take their 30-minute lunch.
So it's every 5 hours, 30 minutes?
Yeah. Now, if they only work 6 hours, and I said this in my last seminar, and they're willing to sign a waiver, because there are people that say, look, I don't want to take a lunch, I'm only working 6 hours.
Okay.
You can have them sign a waiver. Now, the reality is you're going to have them sign a waiver every single time. So my advice to employers is don't schedule them for 6 hours. Either schedule them for 4 hours or schedule them full time. If you're going to schedule someone for 6 hours, please be aware that they need to sign a waiver. And look, if they decide not to sign a waiver that one day because they want to go to lunch, guess what? Now you're going to have someone cover their shift so they can go take their lunch. So it's an operational issue that you need to be aware of.
So in other words, that you're liable to pay them for 8 hours, and if they want to leave at, say, after 6 hours, you still have to pay them for 8 hours.
No, no. If they're an hourly employee, no. This is essentially in the essence of they can waive their lunch. If they're going to only work, let's just say they tell you, hey, I need to leave early today. Can you not? And I'm supposed to be taking lunch at X amount of time. How about I sign a waiver and I leave early today, and I'm also gonna put it in writing that I'm gonna skip the lunch. Does that kind of make sense? So that's how it works. This is one area I'm gonna just touch upon, like I mentioned. Reasonable accommodation, you really need to have a clear HR policy on this. This should be in your handbooks. If you look at my presentation, it's very, very detailed. So this is the one area I'm gonna skip through only because, like I mentioned in the beginning, I want us to have some time to ask questions and I can answer for you. And again, this is kind of something that your HR department should be handling for you. So we're gonna skip all the way to non-competition. I don't know, most people are aware. I constantly meet business owners that are not aware. In general, under California law, non-competes they're not legal. They're not acceptable. What was happening was, though, however, these are out-of-state companies that are, like certain out-of-state companies that work here and then they have the agreements, they allow non-competes. California simply has just said at this point, we're not going to allow any employer to allow an employee to be under a non-compete. The only exception to this is essentially there's 3 situations that you can have a non-compete. You can have if it's someone's taking trade secrets, you're selling a business, and this happens all the time. We have business owners that sell, their business. They are agreeing to not compete in that industry for anywhere from 3 to 5 years, because the reality is you don't want someone selling your business and then opening one right next to you. So it kind of makes sense logically. And partnership dissolution. So if you have a partnership, again, same issue. You don't want the partner dissolving a company and selling their share and starting their own business. But California does not like employees to be in non-competes. They've simply said we do not want employees to feel like employers will stop them from working anywhere. Exception being, again, in Silicon Valley, they used trade secrets. But understand, if you're going to use the word trade secrets is not that, hey, you can't call my clients or that you can't call my vendors. You're going to have to spell out what is it, hey, my trademark. So case in point, my family business owns a trademark, the art of threading, the art of mending. They cannot use that. They cannot take that because that is something that's owned by the company. That's considered a trade secret. So keep that in mind.
Question.
Go ahead, Frank.
What about an employee or business owner sells the business, then goes and takes your customers, takes the customers from that business after he sold you everything, the book of business,
Mhm.
and then opens up another city, but targets his previous customers.
I'm currently actually representing someone, I don't know if you talked to my client, we're actually representing someone. He had a former employee that actually left the business and took pretty much all the clients with them. It's bad faith, and we're actually suing for, it's a breach of fiduciary duty because the competitor that he went to encouraged this manager to leave and then take all the vendors and the clients. And then it really affected my client. They lost over 60% of their business. And that's a breach of a fiduciary duty because it's called the tortious interference with economic benefit. It's a very clear law. So yeah, they can't do that. They can't just sell the business and then decide, hey, I'm going to take all the clients with me. You know, you will then also sue them for breach of contract. Hopefully, you have a well-drafted purchase agreement that kind of spells out, here's what you're not going to do. I'm not just wanting a non-compete. If you're going to sell this to me, the goodwill includes the clients. You agree you're not going to do anything that would hurt the business.
What about a grace period? Are those been added to contracts or to agreements? You know, like,
What-
1 year, you can't touch.
Yeah,
touch
generally
anybody for
non-competes have to be specific, and they can't be forever. Generally, the standard is 3 years,
Okay.
and it tells you that you have to define the area. You cannot say all of California.
That's the radius.
Yeah, it has to be, you can't even say LA County, because LA County is massive, right? You can say city of Artesia, you can say Norwalk, you can say a city, and again, it depends on the business. You can't say, you can't have any business in the city of Artesia. That just doesn't make, it has to be reasonable and has to make sense. So it has to be practical too. Like if somebody's gonna get into another business, you can't say, well, you're not gonna get into this business. Now, if it's a specific industry, then yeah, you can definitely limit.
I think it's applicable in like a situation, work for Xerox, quit Xerox, goes to Canon, I'm a sales rep. So Xerox, and they will always make you sign a non-compete, but that they cannot withhold it. I mean, it doesn't stand up because, you know, they can't stop you from making a living. So that stands in that situation where a sales rep goes from one corporation to another. They make you sign a non-compete. You know, the customer's going to follow the sales rep if they're good. So basically, it protects sales reps in that situation, but not in that book of business. That's kind of like really
Well,
wicked.
it's interesting you bring that up because a lot of business owners, what they don't do, they don't tell their employees that non-competes are not valid. They let them believe a non-compete is valid. Well, now, under the new law, which started being effective this year, you have to send out a mandatory notification letting all your employees know, hey, by the way, all the if we had you sign a non-compete, it is not accepted anymore. You are required now to inform employees, hey, by the way, I had you sign something that no longer can be in effect. So there's been a protection of that now. Because a lot of people don't tell their employees that, hey, you signed this non-compete, but it's not valid. Go ahead, Doris.
So how do you protect your book of business from an employee leaving, walking out the door with all your clients?
I mean, essentially, you gotta make sure you don't have access to everything, unless they're, again, like I said, if they're a high-level manager or operator or district manager or someone that's like that is intimately involved with your business, again, you can have a non-disclosure agreement that's very, very stringent that explicitly explains what the trade secrets are. And generally, client lists, courts are divided on this. They're not so sure, but like if I'm actively calling every single client of yours and then telling them, hey, this person, they're terrible, and here's why. Because I worked them for 20 years, and they're just a crappy business, and they commit fraud, and they say all this kind of stuff about your business, where people are like, wait a minute, I must believe this person because they worked there for 20 years. They can't do that. They can't disparage you to the point where they're forcing people to go to you. So, unfortunately, it still has to be spelled out. So, can you stop, and even in this industry, right, in the beauty industry, can you stop an employee from starting their own business? Not really, unfortunately. What I tell people, and I think what I recommend is like you just have to make sure your confidential information is locked down. They don't have information on all their clients, and you inform clients openly, hey, this person's left. You know, you can't stop them from going there, but the reality also more often than not is people will also come back because they're not happy. So, you know, because that person, if they're, let's assume, in a business that has a great operational system, they go to a solo prop or mom and pop like in the Plaza, and suddenly they're like, hey, I don't like this. I don't want to sit and do that anymore. So, the next area that I'm going to kind of just touch upon is as bad as it sounds, is the pregnancy disability leave, simply because it is very commonly fleshed out. It is fleshed out in the presentation. The part I do want to cover, and really you can keep going through this, is this new, it's called the Reproductive Loss Leave Act. And essentially, it's a way to be compassionate to your employees. What's interesting about this law is this applies to any employee, even if they've, as long as they've worked for you for 30 days, they're entitled to take this leave, which is very unusual because normally under FMLA or pregnancy disability, they have to be with you for quite a while before they can get the leave. In this one, they have to literally work for you for a month and then they could have something. But an event is pretty serious. It's got to be a failed adoption, a miscarriage, a stillbirth, something dealing with reproduction. So obviously, and generally you can allow they can take up to 5 non-consecutive days.
No adoption?
You know, yeah, like it's considered emotional and they're upset, things fall apart. It's a new law. We haven't fleshed out the area.
It's unpaid.
It's unpaid, but here's the problem. It affects every employer. And if I'm a small business owner and I only have 2 employees and I just hired someone because I need help, and they decide now, it's tough being a business owner sometimes when these kind of things come into place because you want to be compassionate but you're like, they just came here. They only been here for a month. You mean they want to take 5 days off after being here for a month? Logically, for a business owner, that can be tough to swallow. But here we are. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Isn't this kind of discriminating because suppose the person's pregnant, coming to look for, trying to get a job, and the employer looks at it and goes, this law, this could be happening, I'm not gonna hire.
Well, so this is only for reproduction. So this is someone that's already started working for you, and so if you decide to act on it, I do not recommend it because
It
you're
would
looking
be
at.
crazy.
Well, here's the thing. Now, if you say I don't, and I've had people ask me this: Are you pregnant? We don't hire pregnant employees. Guess what? You just open yours to a wrongful hiring. Wrongful hiring. So there are employers that do that too, and generally it's always the small business owners because they don't know any better. They're running,
Well,
small
that's why we have
businesses.
you.
Yeah, they have small business, and one of the reasons we do this is for that reason. Go ahead.
So is it only for women or also for men?
Oh, it's for anyone. I mean, the reproductive is it's gender neutral, so it applies to both genders. Yeah.
It's
So
called failed adoption, so you can adopt somebody, you're a
Right, so
man, right?
it goes on both sides.
Just show your paperwork. Make sure. Make sure it's legal.
so the other part that's, I don't want to say sucks, but that sounds terrible to say it that way. But you don't have to provide any documentation.
Oh, what?
There's no documentation
Got it.
required. Somebody can just say that.
Employers.
Um,
We're mad now. Actually, what sucks is to be an employer. Angry now.
so
We made these laws, right?
go ahead.
Just real fast, every 90 days?
Yes, every 90 days they can take up to 5 days. But again, but there's a maximum. You can look.
I got a question.
Here, we can definitely spell out in our policy. And again, this comes back. One of the things I am hoping and I plan on doing is having an HR person here because look, if you have a great policy and you have a handbook that spells all this out, that essentially will cover you for a lot of this stuff. Where we get in trouble is A, we don't know, and B, we don't implement policies and we kind of haphazardly decide to apply these policies. Now, most people, the reason I even picked this policy is because people aren't going to be, I'll be honest with you, most people would not imagine this would be a leave policy in California, but it is. And so it's important because it can create a lot of liability for business owners. So yeah, you have to have a written policy. I tell you, look, when I'm on the other side, when I'm suing an employer, I just want to know, show me a policy. Because that's the first test that the court's going to look at. And if you have a great policy, guess what? I'm going to be nervous. I'm not going to, because I'm like, okay, these guys have a great policy. It seems like they have the steps. They have an HR department. They seem to answer all the questions. It becomes a lot easier.
She got a question.
Go ahead.
Yes, so when you mentioned that this is gender neutral,
Right.
correct, in terms of reproductive loss and leave. So for example, like the policy before that, so it's like, let's say I'm a man, my wife is pregnant, can I leave? Like, is this policy applies to the male?
It does, if you are taking, if you're taking under the FMLA, you're taking leave let's assume you have an expecting, fathers can take off time
Okay.
to take care of their newborn. It is a lesser time, but they can. Again, this is such a brand new law, they're not really, I hate to say, until lawsuits happen, we don't know how this is gonna be taken. It is problematic because there's a confidentiality requirement here, they're not required to give documentation. You also can't discriminate and retaliate against this new hire, and it stinks when you're a new employee or you have an employer that's hired someone new. You can't ask any questions, you can't fire them, and you can't ask for any documentation. I also tell people, look, if there are people that are going to take advantage, they'll find ways to take advantage. But like I think Savita just mentioned, it is also unpaid leave. And it's also 5 days. So do we really want to, get into it? A person that's going to take advantage of leaves will find other leaves, and trust me, then you will find a way to terminate them because
Find a way for them to leave.
or So that's one of the jobs that HR does. They try to make sure people get uncomfortable. I do want to talk about paid sick leave, which is the next. And so there's some new changes. I'm sure most of you are aware that generally prior to beginning of this year, every employer has to provide 3 days of paid sick leave to employees. It's been now upped from 24 hours to 40, which is essentially from 3 to 5 days. So you must provide this. They can start accruing these, and again, this if you have a great payroll company, they'll start accruing it and put it on the pay stubs. They can start getting 1 hour for every, I believe, I'm not gonna, I think it's after 90 days, they get 1 hour for every, I think, month or 2 months that they work for. And they can get to 40 hours. Now, they can use it up, they can be replenished. However, if you have, again, a written policy that says, we're not gonna give you more than 5 days paid sick leave, and here, and if you follow our policy, we'll give you the 5 days, then you should be covered. Now, here's the word that I can't stand, because one of the requirements in the statute, it says that they have to give you reasonable notice. Reasonable is a very wishy-washy, vague word. It can mean somebody calling you at 6 in the morning saying, yeah, I don't feel that great, I'm not going to come into my 8 a.m. shift. So can you retaliate it? Because this conflicts with a lot of policies and handbooks have no call, no show, right? Essentially, if you don't provide notice within 24 hours, it's considered no call, no show. Now, if somebody's getting a day off and they're giving you 2 hours notice, it could be considered reasonable. Hey, I couldn't get out of bed. I called you at 6 in the morning to tell you I'm not going to come at 8. It becomes problematic for that reason. So keep that in mind, and also you can't retaliate. That leave must be granted. You can, and the law doesn't mandate medical certification, but this is, again, if you have and you're going to hear this again and again, a written policy saying, hey, if you're going to ask for time off under paid sick leave, we're going to ask for a doctor's note, then you should be covered. You just cannot deny it outright, saying that, no, unless you give me a doctor's note, I'm not going to give you the paid sick leave. So keep that in mind. This is one of those laws that applies to every single employer. Go ahead.
Policy is only good as, if there is a policy there, and
Right.
when a new employee comes in, that person has to read it, acknowledge everything, right? If you don't do all that, then it's no good.
So what we used to do as Ziba, I used to do this all. I sit with every employee, and we would go through the handbook. We would literally go through and then California has a list of, I think at this point, 25 leaves of absences. Half our handbook was leaves of absences. And it goes over our attendance policy. It goes over all this. Again, the written policy is only, like you said, is only good as if you A, implement it, and B, document it, and actually use it. If you just have everything in the handbook and don't do anything about it, and then kind of pick and choose, you're opening yourself to liability. So you are, again, this is just a way to kind of make sure California essentially wants employees to be taken care of. They don't also want, I think this is also, I hate to say the word COVID, but it is COVID based. They don't want people coming in if they're not feeling well. They'd much rather that, and most people, cannot afford to take unpaid days all the time. It's very easy to give unpaid leave to people, but if they're, again, a minimum wage employee that's making, at that point, anywhere from $14 to $15 an hour, they can't afford to take unpaid days. So I think this is the policy. It's driven by that reason. My next favorite policy we're going to cover, and this is one that I think it's a lot of people will keep going. Off-duty cannabis use. So and this should be very interesting to see because at this point you no longer can, if you know an employee is using, in the past used to be people would take cannabis for medical reasons and you could provide a doctor's note. Because California has approved recreational marijuana use, at this point if you know an employee, you overhear them, you can smell it in their car, you know that you overheard them talking about, I went to this party, or my God, I ate a ton of stuff because I was high. You can no longer discriminate against them and say, well, I don't want you working for me because you use weed. You have to essentially show you cannot make an employment decision based on the fact that they use weed. The test is, are they impaired? So it's kind of like, I compare it to drinking alcohol. People cannot come to work drunk. There's a reason for that. So people cannot come to work high. So this is not saying, hey, we're allowing people to smoke at work. We're just saying you can no longer discriminate against them if they do use weed and it's not at work. Now, there's a confusion there. People sometimes say, what do you mean I have to allow them to? No, you don't have to do that. They cannot be impaired. And there's also, there are industries that do drug test. And so before it would be where if cannabis showed up in their bloodstream, they will not be hired, they could get terminated. Again, it's called non-psychoactive metabolites. If they can show that, hey, I have cannabis in my bloodstream, but I used it X amount of time ago, and it's not psychoactive, it's in my bloodstream, but it's not affecting me, you are still considered to have passed the drug test. You cannot say you failed the drug test. So you can no longer terminate people based on the fact that they've used cannabis. So keep that in mind. Now, the main thing is that there are industries that have safety precautions, and again, they're exempted. If an industry that safety is a huge, construction probably comes to mind, security, law enforcement, those come to mind. Those are expected that you're not going to be using any kind of stuff. The other one's going to be FY. It's 3 slides. We're done with this part now. Workplace violence. And the reason we're going to skip through a lot of this is because, again, I want to get through some of this quickly so we can ask questions. We're actually doing pretty good on time, but still. California has a huge reason to push this, and I'll talk about it when we'll skip through a couple of slides, and I'll tell you why I'm skipping some of this. Yeah, stay here. So, one of the main reasons that people need to understand, employers can no longer have a blind eye. They need to know if there are indicators. What's been happening is, I'm sure you've all seen the videos over store clerks are getting attacked, people are throwing stuff at them, employees are getting in fights with each other, or exes are coming and stalking and intimidating their partners. If you're an employer at this point, California is essentially making employers now, I hate to say this, as well, at the head of preventing some of this. So, or knowing about, if coworkers are bullying and harassing each other, we all send, I don't know about you, but I'm guilty of sending memes to people. But if you're, this is only sending memes about a certain coworker, and all you have a group text about this one employee, that can be seen as bullying and harassment. That could be a problem if you're a coworker. So California has decided, and it's very wise wisdom, and we'll talk about the next one. Next slide. Starting in July, most employers are going to be required to have a workplace violence prevention program, almost like a sexual harassment prevention program, or a harassment prevention program. It's going to be part of the injury prevention programs. I don't know if many of you already do that. You need to just not have 911. You need to tell people who else to call. It can't just be call 911. There needs to be a law enforcement name, contact, department, depending on, let's assume you're in La Palma, you have to put that police station number. Sorry, I didn't use it as an example, but you know, because most people put 911 on their
Really?
labor post, so
Walk
they put
next door.
911. Yeah.
We have a police station next door, just next door.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that you do.
what's really very, very troubling, not troubling, but it's problematic is, at this point, if you know something's happening between coworkers, or you know that an employee has been harassed, or has been a client or a customer has come in and harassed that person, you must investigate those incidents. You can no longer just say, well, I'm just the, you know, it happened. I can't do anything about it. You have to put it into place. You have to have a whole policy. Here's what's going to happen. If there's harassment and bullying between two coworkers, here's what we're going to do. If you are attacked by a customer or a vendor, here's what we're going to do. To the point where, at this point, starting next year, employers can seek temporary restraining orders against people on behalf of their employees. This is pretty crazy, because generally temporary restraining orders are done for immediate family members, or where someone's being harassed by another party, civil restraining orders, which is what we handle. So this should be interesting to see how an employer now is being almost made to be a police person. They have to take care of this. So you also must notify every employee what the benefits are. They need to know what the program is. You can't hide it. They have to know what the policy, again, when you sit down with your new employee, guess what you're going to do? You're going to go over your harassment policy, and you're going to also go over the workplace prevention policy. Go ahead, Frank.
You're asking the employer to be a police officer. So
Essentially.
Are they gonna get training? Is there
Well, so
something to protect them?
we have till July to figure it out. So that's why California is generous enough to give every employer till July. Hey, we won't tell you what to do, but you need to have a policy in place. Now, the reality is a lot of the firms, a lot of their HR people are working on policies, and so again, it is as simple as, if you're going to do sexual harassment training or harassment training, you would just add this on and make the trainings longer. So I believe it's 2 hours. This might make it a 2.5 hour training. You just have to be, you know, involved. It's probably better to stack it onto something you're already doing, that you're required to do by law, rather than doing a separate.
So you're supposed to do this every year?
I believe so, yes. So, and then I want to go over.
So is that like a required training then?
Yes. Yeah, it's not an optional training. It's just like the supervisor training for harassment. It is no longer optional. It is a requirement. And so I'm going to pause here for a quick. I want to switch topics for a little bit, because my last topic actually is the Corporate Transparency Act. Before we get into that, are there any other questions? Anything you'd like me to address? Any
I would
burning?
like to go back to the marijuana thing.
Yes.
Because, especially like police officers, and you're talking about like certain people, how do they test them for, because they could just say, hey, I'm injured and I need it, and so, I mean, how do you, you know?
If they now, because medical use is
Yeah.
approved and they have a doctor's note, they can
Right.
do that. Now, again,
Talk
the
about
the standard,
impairment,
right? The standard is impairment, and also if they get the drug test, because their police officers are required to get drug tested, and the metabolite, it's a very technical term, but there's a way to know if it's like, if I just took marijuana and I got the drug test, they could tell that it's been in my bloodstream for a certain amount of time. But if I took it, let's say 10 days, I'm not a drug expert, but let's assume I smoked 10 days ago. It's going to show them that, yes, there was cannabis in my bloodstream, but it's not like, active. It's not affecting me. So that's how detailed you need to get to if you're going to require drug tests.
But if you're relying on that, and that's your profession, you're driving a truck.
Well, the exemption is for safety. So again, truck drivers come to mind as well. So it really comes down to what industry it is, but it's essentially for retailers, for business owners like ours. We can no longer judge people for, if we know they're using this recreationally. We can't discriminate against them. So it's just another layer for us to not get sued on. Any other questions before I move on to this? Because that's the other one that's been stressing a lot of people out. So the Corporate Transparency Act is essentially, California decided, and it's very wide wisdom, that they're going to prevent money laundering. So the goal of this thing is to essentially want everyone to be transparent about their corporate structures. Now, this applies to everyone that has a LLC, corporation, any kind of any legal entity in California has to abide by this. The good news is, if you have an existing LLC that was created prior to this year, you have up to a year to get this done. You know, and there's a form. It is pretty intrusive. I went through it, the intake form. We're doing it for some of our clients right now. You have to list every beneficial owner, anyone that's more than a 20% owner in a business entity now has to be listed. And the purported reason being, oh, we want to prevent money laundering. The problem with this is that the government generally doesn't behave very well with information that it doesn't need. So they're going to be getting a lot of information about people that don't want to be involved, right? Unfortunately, now they have to get listed. So again, if you are an LLC, and we can go to the next slide. I'm going to go through just a little bit quickly because it's it's a form, but it's very detailed. You need to mention every beneficial owner. A beneficial owner is anyone that's 20% or higher owner of that company. You have to have their full legal name, the date of birth, the address, unique identifying numbers like Social Security or EIN or TIN. So it just begs to, like, they want to know everything. And the problem ends up being is it's not clear what the benefit really is going to be to someone disclosing so much information to the government. And I'm not a conspiracy nut. It's concerning because there are business owners do have privacy concerns here. But unfortunately, this has gone into effect. We do have a year to do this. Again, the purported reason they're saying this is, oh, we want to also be able to collect better taxes, and we also want to eliminate money laundering. So, and that's all I have right now. I actually went through a lot quicker than I thought, but
That's good.
any questions? If not, we can go ahead.
This has nothing to do with FinCEN.
But
This has nothing to do with FinCEN.
oh, it does. I mean, I think you have to list yourself on that.
This is in California.
Right, but you have to go on that
On
site.
FinCEN, so-
Yeah, so they're
Both
working
sides.
they're working on congestion. So what he's asking for is there's a federal, essentially California is requiring LLCs to go on that federal registry to register themselves. There's a whole form that you have to fill out. And again, it's not a California entity. It is a federal entity that's getting all that information. That's the second concern, that this is not just going to stay in California, it's going to federal.
But
And-
if you form the LLC prior to January of this year, you don't have to do that.
You have a year. Everyone, every LLC, every business entity has to do it.
Ask me to
I
restrict.
think the best way to get around it is to eat some of those brownies laced with the cannabis and just say you forgot to do it. You know, you're not hearing anything.
I'm not so sure that's the. is that the chamber's official point of view? I'm sure that's not maybe a problem. So,
Best way to deal with it is move out of California.
It almost sounds like it's part of the Patriot Act too, because they're trying to weed out offshore people
Yes.
and ownership. It has a lot to do with that because of 9/11.
yes.
You know.
See, as much as I'm making fun of it, the
Yeah.
reality also, that's why it's overreaching as well, because
Yeah.
this applies to non-citizens, this applies to anyone that's
Yeah.
living in a foreign country. If they happen to own an ownership interest in California and an entity in California, that's where the debate ends up being, is like, do they really need to know all this information about people that aren't even, you know?
If you, as a banker, you know, the clients come in, they have to fill out the beneficial owners form.
Right.
You have to do it, no matter what. If you have a business and you want to open up an account,
Right.
you have to fill out the BOFS.
Okay. Well, that's all I have. So I wanted to thank you. This was an experiment. Like I said, I am planning on doing this one every quarter. My next one's going to be, I know it sounds crazy, but it's going to be Thursday, May 2nd. I'm not sure if this time works. It seems like it does. It's going to be on my second biggest clients that I handle for my clients, which is the ADA lawsuits. And I'm not sure if you've been part of it. If you are a business owner in Artesia, it's very, very highly likely that you've already been sued for ADA. We represent a lot of employers and business owners, and the part that's not great is they can sue tenants as well as the landlord. So they double dip. They always inevitably sue the landlord as well as the tenant. And so we tend to represent both. And August 1st, I'll be doing a family law legal clinic. It'll be primarily focused on fathers' rights because a lot of fathers don't know their rights. And then finally, as crazy as it is, October 3rd, I'm going to cover 2025 laws because by September, we usually know what's going to happen in the coming year.
Thank you.
All right.
Good job.
So-
Do we have our special guest?
oh, yes. Come on
Let
in.
me introduce her.
Yeah, please do.
You can cut off your live stream if you
Oh.
want.
Why not live?
No.
Why?
Let her give her the
Let
mic,
me-
please.
Let me, it's okay. I'll,
No, but then it won't be heard on the stream.
Oh,
I want her to
really?
be able to heard on the YouTube stream.
yeah,
So-
okay, so I just want to do a quick intro. So, anyways, my name is Janet Conklin,
There somewhere.
but you don't have to live stream me. You can live stream her. I'm not important. But I just wanted to introduce our special person who's running for Congress, and I will let her say everything about herself because I want to keep it a mystery, okay? So, come on up. I won't even say your name because I'll let you say everything.
All right,
Okay.
amazing presentation, very, very informative. My name is Vijo Sutar. I am running for Congress in District 35, which is predominantly the Inland Empire. I think I can talk about this. Yeah.
The YouTube live.
Oh, cool, okay.
Otherwise I can't hear you.
Okay. So my name is Vijo Sutar. I am running for Congress in District 35. The cities are predominantly in the Inland Empire, which is part of Chino Hills, going to Chino, Ontario, up to Fontana, Montclair, Rancho Cucamonga, Pomona, and down to Eastville. So that is pretty much my area. I am from Ontario, actually. A little bit about myself. I have been into hotels my entire life. My family, my parents, they came from India. They they started working at a motel in Corona. A few years later, they ended up buying the hotel which I was born at in Corona, Tiffany Inn. And since then, I went to school in my district. I went to Pomona for college at Cal Poly Pomona. And I started my executive education at Harvard. So it's called Executive MBA, which you do at your own pace. And I'm on track to finishing that and getting my MBA. I officially started to step into the hotel business in 2017, which is, my dad had hotels such as, Motel 6, ABVI, but I was like, I don't really like that kind of side of hospitality, so I switched it over to boutique hospitality. So 2017, I bought the first lodge, of course, for my dad, Crestline, which is called Sleepy Hollow Cabins and Hotel. 2018, I partnered with him, got another lodge. 2019, I bought my first lodge in Kernville. And last year, me and my sister, we bought an Ace Hardware. So we've been expanding our portfolio, and I am very active with the HOA, Asian American Hotels Owners Association, and I have been to DC for advocacy conferences in the past 2 years, and I think that's what kickstarted, my passion to actually do something about what I'm advocating, right? And, all of this very in detail, learned about it, and I think there's, I can do something about it, right, if I go to Congress. And the minimum age to run for Congress is 25. I'm 26, so I gotta start somewhere, right? Go big or go home.
You made it.
So, yeah, that's a little bit about myself. And besides that, I'm a pilot as well. I fly from the Chino airport.
Not with cannabis, right? You're not that.
No. I
Just
got
wanna clear that up.
So what's your platform?
So yes, my platform, the biggest platform I stand for is, of course, small businesses. I'm a small business owner. Whatever laws that affect you guys affect me as well, and I want to do something about it. The second one is education. The future starts with the children. I grew up in this district. I went to college, high school, yes. Now I look back to the education, I would say, level. It is diminishing. We have the infrastructure of schools and colleges, they renovated, but the level that is being taught is really, it's going downhill. You know, as we know, education is the key to success. Knowledge is the key to success. And right now, our children, whoever starting from, I would say, small, like 5 years old, from kindergarten to senior year, the level of education is not as it was before. And we need to get back to that. Go ahead.
So you're familiar with classical education, going back to where our forefathers in this country were educated? I think somewhere along 1895, the education process, they began to dumb America down.
Exactly,
Yeah,
yes.
So I'm very familiar with that, and I've got maybe tests from that we could share just to show you where we used to be to where we are now.
Compared to the world, we are not in the top
even,
10, top
not even.
50, not even, right?
Not even.
And so and that's why we're having trouble, you know, getting people to sign up for the military because they're not smart enough to join the military. So we need to do something about that.
Exactly.
And it starts with the education. So that's the two main big platform is education and small business. And I think those are the first things I'm going to start with when I step into Congress. Yeah.
Any questions for her?
Any questions?
Are you going to stop the war or not?
War is bad, so of course I will take that step towards ending any war that's going on.
So any other experience in politics?
No, not really, and I am learning every single day. As I said, for the past 2 years, I've been visiting DC. I've met with most of our California representatives, senators, seeing how things go with the association, AHOA. That actually gave me a platform to actually go to DC and learn more about it. And it's a learning game, right? You know, every day you learn something new, which makes you better for tomorrow.
Are
So.
they supporting you?
Yes, they are. Yeah.
So, Rachel, right now, environmental is on top of almost every agenda for
Right.
me.
Okay.
I'm local chamber, I'm in Rotary. Everywhere I go, I have politicians in front of me, and they are promising different things. And my priority remains environment.
Right.
Can you be very specific with what you believe is going to be needed in the next 30 years from your district to be a leader in environmental issues?
Have you heard the phrase, Rome wasn't built in a day? It is not built in a day.
I'm
So
from India,
Yeah.
so be very specific.
Oh, boy.
you're from India. Well, I'm from India too. I grew up there for a little bit. To give you a straight up answer, I don't know, right? And as I said, I learn different things, new things every single day. My goal is the same as yours. I don't know the solution because my superiors don't know the solution, so well, who am I, right? So my agenda is whatever I put my name behind, I will make sure that it is for the good for the environment, be it environment first, be it education, business, and so on and so forth. So that's my approach. Anything else?
All the best.
Thank you. Really appreciate that.
Please take, there's plenty of food, please take some with you. I ordered too much.
If you guys are interested, please feel free to
Did
donate.
good.
Thanks everyone for coming, and you can
Thank
find
you.
this information
You're
out on
going
the
to get
chamber
some
too.
Oh, I
tough ones on there.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, no problem.
thank you.
Donate to her, if you guys feel like.
And the other thing is, of course, I need funds to expand my reach of the campaign. So if anybody appreciates to donate, I appreciate that.
Namaste. Namaste. So,
Yes, ma'am.
you live in Bahamas?